Hey everybody, we wanted to bring you a little something different this week. We're pretty transparent. We kind of, as we go through things in life, we kind of share them with you guys. And so this week's video is a little different. It is about an eviction, and a lot of people ask the question, are you legally able to evict during COVID?
And should you evict during COVID?
And so we just wanted to address that a little bit and tell you our opinion. We live in the state of Georgia, and so it varies a little bit from state to state, and it varies even a little bit, city to city, county to county. And so our advice is, first of all, check your local regulations and zoning rules and everything like that, because that's what it's going to depend on. Different states, especially right now during the pandemic, and although we're kind of coming out of the pandemic at this point, there is still some rules in place.
For sure.
And so, let's give you a little backstory. We don't want to sound horrible like we're evicting somebody because they're out for COVID.
Right.
That is not the case in this case.
And you guys know that we do own rental properties. We have multiple rental properties. One of those rental properties in particular is a duplex, and that's the one that we're speaking about today.
Yeah, and we've been landlords for about 4 years now, and we've been extremely, a lot of people tell us we've been extremely lucky. We have only ever had one vacancy for 2 weeks.
Yep.
Out of all of our rentals.
But with that being said, we're also rather picky about who we will allow to rent our properties, and we do a very thorough screening of our prospective tenants before we let them rent the property.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what we want to set this up with here, and then we'll touch base back on this eviction process during the COVID at the very tail end of this. And this won't be a long video, guys, but to us, our best advice to you is have a very good lease agreement.
For sure.
We happen to be real estate agents, so we have access to multiple lease agreements, provided by the state, by the real estate association,
Yes.
different things like that. And so our lease is pretty ironclad. It is very simple, it is very thorough, and we outline everything with a prospective tenant way before they ever sign and move into one of our properties.
For sure.
And so, Kim mentioned screening. We do screen our tenants very thorough also. Now, while you can't discriminate, and we do not discriminate, if you look at our tenants, it's been very diverse.
Yes, definitely.
But it doesn't mean you have to take the first person that comes out and fills out an application.
Exactly.
While we do have sympathy for people, we don't necessarily, a lot of places when you go to an apartment complex, stuff like that, they'll simply pull a credit score, and it's, if you meet a 620, then you've got the apartment. We don't necessarily do that. We look at your past rental history, we will look at your work history, and we want to hear your story. And so we sometimes give people a break. Sometimes if they're going through a tough time and there's a legitimate reason that they've had a credit problem, we may overlook that.
Yeah, for sure.
Other times we may not. It's dependent on every situation.
Well, and we look at every facet. We look at their situation, we look at their income, we look at their job history, we do look at their past rental history, but also we just, like Randall said, we just listen to their story. We want to hear what they have to say, what they're like, and then we just really kind of go with our gut.
Yeah, we've always been very fortunate. We've always had very good tenants, and had very little problems out of any of them.
Yep.
Now, in this instance, basically what happened is this tenant had been with us
about 2.5 years.
About a little over 2 years, and it started out really good. It started out with him and his fiance, no problems, everything was great, always paid on time. Then they split. And no judgment. I don't know what happened. None of my business.
No, goodness no.
But, when you go from a two-person income to a one-person income, it causes financial hardships. And we was understanding with that. And so we cut them some breaks for quite a few months, and kind of waived the late fees and let him get back on his feet.
Yep, let him pay late and as he could.
Yeah. And so then that finally seemed to get better. He finally seemed to get back on his feet. And then he wanted to move in his brother.
Mhm.
And so, since he was kind of struggling with rent, he'd always been, a very respectful young man.
For sure.
And so we didn't really have a problem with that. And so we let his brother move in. And that's kind of where the problem started, to be honest. We started getting a few complaints from neighbors about noise levels.
Nothing major.
And, but we kind of, by the time they moved in, we went to a month.
Just to
And
test the waters
just to
and make
test the
sure that
waters.
they were going to be able to continue to meet the rent, because we don't want somebody living there in hardship either.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. We always want it to be a blessing to somebody, not a curse.
Definitely.
And we do the same thing when we sell houses too. We don't want somebody to be house poor. And so we're kind of the same way with the rent. So when his brother moved in, it was like, okay, we'll do it on a month until we make sure this is going to work out for everybody. Seemed to be okay.
Went great for
No
about
late
6
payments,
months.
no problems, no complaints, and everything went well. And so they was really wanting to, to sign another year lease, and that's typical what we like doing too, because it protects us and it protects them too.
Yeah.
And so we agreed to another year lease, and that's kind of where it started going downhill from there.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened.
Well, and we don't know. I think that there was a little bit of an issue with jobs there. I think some employment was a little hard to find, and we were receiving rent payments late again, and we did listen to those stories and cut breaks again. We did waive late fees and accepted late rent payments until enough was enough.
Right. It got to be enough times, and I won't go into details, but it got to be way more than enough times that we decided, okay, at the end of your lease, we're not going to renew your lease.
Yeah.
So let's just clarify a few things here. One, it had nothing to do with COVID.
No.
When he was facing job difficulties was way before
Way
COVID
before
ever started.
Yeah.
And so, this particular, these two units we have here, we're in the process of remodeling them and updating them, and renting that whole neighborhood has been going up, and we haven't increased
Yes.
rent there in quite a while.
Right.
And so with doing the updates and everything, we knew we was going to have to go up on rent to help cover some of those costs. It's just the way it is.
And we knew that it would be a hardship on that tenant to meet that new rent payment, since it had been such a struggle to meet the existing rent payment.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the reason why we really didn't kick him out. We really didn't.
No.
It wasn't a typical eviction. In other words, it wasn't that he was behind on rent. We just opted not to renew the lease.
And we gave him many weeks' notice. Our lease is written to provide 30 days notice if we choose not to renew the lease. We actually ended up giving him almost 2 months' notice that we were not going to be renewing that lease, so that he had plenty of time to look for a new place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, we try to be sympathetic and have empathy there. But anyways, basically what happened is we got to the end of that, and it was the last day of the month. He was supposed to be on the last day of the month, and he came up and expressed concern that his new place wasn't going to be ready for another 2 weeks.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, I don't want to put anybody out on the street. So it's like we agreed to another 2 weeks. We prorated it, didn't make him pay a full month. We prorated, let him pay 2 weeks with the agreement that he would be out on the 15th of the month.
Right.
And again, we're renovating, so I'm having to move contractors out to have work done. And so we moved that out
Right.
and had scheduled the work to begin on the 16th. And we was in touch with him along this time. It's like, okay, how's everything going? We need to come. And again, we are very thorough when we do things. So we do a final walkthrough and all that.
We're by the book.
And so, touching base with him about 4 or 5 days ahead of time, he's like, yeah, come by on, I won't. The 15th happened to fall on a Monday, which is kind of strange, so a lot of people tend to move on the weekend. So I just touched base with him to see if he'd be moving out on the weekend, or if he would indeed still need the Monday to get his stuff out. And he said he would need through Monday, that he wouldn't be able to get it all out over the weekend. It's like, that's fine, we'll just run by Monday afternoon. And then when Monday afternoon came, about 3 o'clock that day, he sent me a text saying that he wasn't going to be able to be out. And it's like, well, that's a problem, because I have contractors supposed to start work the next day.
Exactly.
And so we went and met with him that evening. He ended up refusing to leave the premises. And so at that point, I realized this is going to be a problem. And again, we make sure we dot every I, cross every T.
Yeah.
So at that point, we just left the premises, and he left us no choice but to file an eviction notice. And again, like I say, that's where it kind of gets a little muddy, because it really wasn't an eviction because his lease was up. But in the state of Georgia, if somebody refuses to leave your property, that's the only option you have, is to file an eviction notice.
Well, and the legal term for that in our lease in particular is holding over.
Yeah.
He was holding the property over past the termination of his lease or the expiration of his lease. He needed to be out of the property by the end of his lease, or we would go into that holding over period. And our lease does contain a fee per day for each day you hold over the property.
Yeah. And so basically, he left us no choice. We had to go to the magistrate court, file an eviction notice, which takes a little bit of time. But I mean, luckily where we live at, it's pretty quick, it's pretty efficient. And so they end up serving him notice next day, stating that, you know, he had to be out, or he could file, you know, if he wanted to answer and fight it.
Right.
And so we had to go through that process. Now, I'll be completely upfront. This is the first time we've ever had to do it. We've never had this issue before. And I'm very thankful for the way the things are set up in our area, because it was very efficient, and it worked very quick.
Well, and they were extremely helpful. And so because that being our first time doing this, we learned something new. That's why we wanted to share it with you guys.
Right, so we kind of wanted to share you that process, because it came up, because we are coming out of this COVID pandemic. It was made reference to, it's like, well, you can't kick me out right now because of COVID.
Right.
Well, that's not true.
Not entirely, no.
It depends on the situations. Again, that's the
Right.
reason why I mentioned before, make sure you have an ironclad lease agreement. But two, it depends on the property. If you're dealing in Section 8 properties, if you're dealing with where it's government subsidized properties, where the tenant pays a reduced rent and the government subsidizes and stuff like that.
Or if it's apartments that are corporate owned or, large company owned,
Yeah.
then there are some protections there given the COVID pandemic. But because this is a privately owned rental property that is not backed by a government loan, we are not covered under the COVID protection. Therefore, we were able to proceed with an eviction.
Right. And again, the circumstances, I don't want to sound like we're tyrants here, because we're not. It wasn't that he didn't have a job. It wasn't that he was out of work. It wasn't that he was sick with COVID or had family members with COVID. Anything. None of that pertained
applied,
in this
yes.
situation. It was just a matter of he was refusing to leave the property. The lease was up. We even granted him an extra 2 weeks, and then he still refused. So we had to do something to get him out of the property. So one, so we could renovate it, and two, so we could get it rented out again. I mean, we're just, we don't get rich off our rental properties. We try to be very fair on our rents. And so every day somebody's not in there, we're losing money. I mean, it's just, that's anybody that's out there doing rentals, that's what they do it for, to try to supplement their income. And so that's the reason why we want to make this video. One, because, this is the first time we've ever had to go through the process, so we kind of want to walk you through that a little bit. But two, we have a lot of friends and families like, I've always wanted to do rentals, but I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. And, what happens if somebody don't pay the rent? How hard is it to get them out? And so we wanted to cover that a little bit. So to go back a little bit, one, we said you needed a really good rental contract.
For sure.
And if you're not a licensed real estate agent, or if you don't have somebody that you can get one of those contracts and get them to help you fill it out, then our suggestion is you need to hire a lawyer to write your lease agreement, because it is a legally binding document, and it needs to be rock solid.
Yes.
And so with that piece of equipment, with that tool, if it's properly written, if a problem does come up, you're protected. And when you go to the court, that's what the court's going by, because not only do you sign it, but your tenants sign it.
Yes.
And you can bring up the argument that, well, some people don't read it all or anything. Well, then if they don't, then shame on them.
Right. Well, and we go over our leases with all of our tenants. When they first sign the lease, we explain everything in the
Yes.
lease to each of our tenants, so they are fully aware of what's in there.
Yes. And so, if you're going to get in the rental market and you want to avoid problems, like I say, a lot of people say we've been very lucky. I don't necessarily consider it lucky. I think we're very diligent.
Yeah. There's a little bit of luck, but a lot of it has to do with doing your homework.
Yes. But do proper screenings. verify their information, verify their work history, sit down and talk to them. I mean, people are human. We never rent to somebody without sitting down and talking to them. When we have several conversations before we get to the point of, yes, you're the ones we want to select to let live on our property. And so just talk to people. You know, you can learn a lot just by talking to people.
Definitely.
But beyond that, you know, you have your solid lease agreement, and just like she said, we go over every single line with them, so there is no misunderstandings.
Right.
We don't take it for granted that they're just going to read the whole entire contract, because it's, you know, 2, 3, 4 pages long. And so we go over every line. We let them know our expectations. And I'll tell you, we're a little different than most landlords too, because when we go collect rent on the first of each month, we go do it in person.
Yep.
And we also change the filters ourselves.
On the air conditioning unit.
And there's two reasons for that. One, the life of your air conditioning unit is that filter. If it's not getting changed properly, it's going to suffocate the system and you're going to have problems. We don't like to have problems with our rental properties. But two, it gives you that opportunity to get inside the residence and make sure they're taking proper care of it.
Well, and a third point to that as well, it gives you time to actually go speak with your tenants and keep that relationship built. If they're having issues, they can talk to us. If we have anything we need to let them know about, it's a perfect time to do that.
Yes. I mean, we become very good friends with most of our tenants. I mean, we're friends on Facebook, you know. I mean, they let us know when they're going on vacation so we can kind of keep an eye on, you know, on the place when they're gone.
They watch our videos.
You know, yeah, most of them subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch our videos. You know, we like to build that relationship. That's what we're about, you know, and we feel that's missing in a lot of, especially when you get into large apartment complexes. It's all just business.
Right.
And this is people's lives. It's our lives. It's our tenants' lives. And so, you know, if you do a few basic ground rules, it'll save you a lot of trouble and a lot of heartache later on. And I think that's why we've been so fortunate in doing what we're doing with our rental properties. And so again, I know this video is a little different, but we told you from the get-go, you know, our videos, you know, not only do they include the RV, we do home renovations. You know, you've seen where we flipped one of our properties, or was going to do a flip, and then we ended up renting it out.
Right.
But this just kind of goes along with that. So we want to help others understand. And real estate's a great investment, but a lot of people are scared to get into the rental market. And I hope this helps you not maybe be so scared.
For sure.
And,
we love being landlords. We love those relationships. We love the property. And we do hope that eventually all of our rental properties will be enough to supplement our income to where we can travel more often.
Yes, that's our strategy, is to keep building our rental properties so that we don't have to do the typical 8 to 5 anymore, and it'll allow us to travel the country. Some of my friends I like to pick on is, you know, I tell them, you know, that they do odd and end, they have side hustles too. You know, like most people do have a side hustle nowadays.
Yeah.
But I like to tell them, our side hustle, I make money while I sleep. And I don't mean that to sound bad or, you know, or anything like that. But, you know, with a rental property, you know,
it's very passive income.
Yes. You know, you don't have to be there every day. And I'll tell you, one more tip, and we'll cut it off there. When we do have a vacancy come up in one of rentals like this one's coming up, we're going in there, we're putting all new flooring in, we check everything from top to bottom. We check we check the stove, we check the dishwasher, we check the hot water heater, the air conditioning system, because I would much rather fix something with nobody being there, so it's not an inconvenience to anybody.
Yes, rather than have somebody get in there and have a problem and then have to disrupt their lives to go in and fix it.
Exactly. If you've seen the Percheron we did, like I think 2 or 3 days before they moved in, the dishwasher leaked, and we had to put a whole new dishwasher in. Was that a setback in the budget? Sure, but you know what? I'd much rather do it when nobody in there, so that we can take care of it properly without them having a problem and them having a flooded floor and them having to be the inconvenience by a repairman coming in and everything like that. So that's just another tip. You know, anytime you do have a vacancy, take the time to make sure everything's in tip-top shape. Because again, you know, that was our one promise to ourselves when we decided to get into the rental market, was we was not going to be slumlords.
No.
We buy good rentals. We don't buy cheap, run-down places and then just try to put, pardon the expression, lipstick on a pig. We really make sure they're good properties. If it's not someplace I'd be willing to live, I'm
we
not
don't
renting
buy
it to somebody.
Yep.
Because that's just the way I am. If I wouldn't do it myself, then I wouldn't ask anybody else to do it.
Right.
And so that saves us a lot of trouble down the road too. So again, I know that's kind of a quick video, kind of not RV related this week, and I apologize for that. But
Well,
we did.
and a little controversial given this day and age that we're living in right now.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of chaos going on right now in this world, and and I know that changes the landscape for a lot of people. And so we hope that our videos continue to help people understand what we are, what we do. But I hope it also helps you in becoming a better you. And if you was really on the verge of maybe taking that first leap and doing your first rental property, and you're a little worried about it, I hope this maybe helps overcome some of those fears for you.
Yeah, for sure.
And so again, we'll be back again next week. I think we got something pretty cool coming up next week. We're hoping
Yep.
we're far enough along that we can make the big announcement next week.
Yep, we
So
sure
make
hope
sure you
so.
tune in every Sunday, 6 p.m., and we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.